Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together later about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. The theme of this season is Back to Business. The past couple of seasons have involved deep dives on horror history, and this time around we're taking it easy with all of that, and instead focusing on talking about what is most interesting to us in each of the movies that we watch. So kick back, relax, and enjoy it with us. I'm not going to lie, it feels a little liberating to not have to come up with some sort of clever tie-in from the season theme to the specifics of the movie that we watched, while also not immediately giving away the name of the movie or whatever it is that we try to do each week.
Yeah.
This week we watched American Werewolf in Paris because you wanted to.
Yeah. Strictly because I wanted to.
Yeah. I feel like this one probably would have been a good fit for our season on 90s horror movies.
Yeah. No, I think that's where it was going to be, but I couldn't find it streaming or something. I can't remember the specifics. I wasn't going to make you pay for something like that.
Well, also, nothing would have stood up to Anaconda for a 1997 movie anyway, so yeah, we just needed to take this one on its own terms later.
Yep. No, you're right. 100%.
So I had never seen this movie before. I know that you had, but this was my first time, and I thought surely I've seen parts of it at some point, but I most definitely had not. And so I didn't really know what to expect going into it, but the opening just took me right back to the 90s. That font, that music, that gritty looking cathedral in the rain at night. I mean, this is right in that same vein as lots of other stuff we watched from around this time. Oh,
yeah, without a doubt. I feel like movies around that period, late 90s, early 2000s, it had just a strange darkness about it. I'm thinking of Batman, but that came out late 80s, 89 or whatever, the original Batman, or not the original. Anyway, where I'm getting at is it definitely creates an atmosphere that's almost cozy, almost like if you're one of the people that like it when it rains, just to stay inside and not do much. It almost kind of helps create that. But now going back to that and watching these movies from back then, I still kind of get the same little feelings. Something about that period, man. They just wanted films darker.
Yeah, I feel like a similar thing with The Crow and then eventually The Matrix. There's definitely lots of 90s examples of sort of that look to the movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. This is definitely a young Bryce movie that I definitely watched.
You had mentioned that before. Did you own it, or did you just see it on TV, or what was your experience with it?
I think it was for some reason, and I don't know why, but for some reason we had HBO at the time. And I don't know if it was back when cable would give you free months of HBO. I don't know. Anyway, because we wouldn't have been able to afford it, but is why I say that. Doesn't make that much sense. But anyways, so I think it was on HBO or one of those free channels. And back then they would just loop the same movies over and over. And so I think I just kind of stuck to that one. And then as the years went on, you started watching edited TV versions and things like that. But yeah, it was just one that I just started randomly watching. I assume it had something to do with it being the drummer from That Thing You Do,
yeah.
Recognizing, where he came from or something. It's the only thing I could think of. But yeah, if you this, RoboCop, Terminator 2, those Death Wish, those types of movies were what the movies I would sneak. I would watch them on my own because we had a TV in my room and have to change the channel real fast when the parents came in, kind of thing. But those are that's my genre. But this was definitely one of those films.
Well, when I was young, around the time that my brother was born, my dad also had kind of, I guess, a step up in his career. And at that point, we got Disney Channel.
Whoa.
So, similar experience, you probably learned a little more about the female anatomy than I do.
You damn right I did.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, because you had mentioned beforehand that this was like kind of your quintessential movie from your childhood, and I'm like, what a weird choice. What is the story behind that? So
yeah, it was just, there's not anything specific. Like, no, like, you know, like I have memories of like my grandma on my mom's side. Like she loved Happy Gilmore, and so every time we went over, we'd watch Happy. Like it didn't make sense to us because she was old, but she would laugh so hard. It wasn't anything like that whatsoever. It was just one that I just watched, and I was just like, I'm keeping this train going, and just kept watching it. I haven't watched it in quite a few years though, so I didn't remember much going into it.
It was interesting because I feel like it was a combination of a lot of things. And I feel like when we were doing our season on 90s horror, we kind of accidentally stumbled across a lot of movies that seem to have very directly influenced movies that came later that were maybe like more famous. Mm-hmm. And I thought that this one really kind of could fit into that same type of thing. Like it felt like this one to me wasn't always firing on all cylinders. And it definitely had like one foot in the horror comedy world. But it also kind of set up some tropes or some ideas that I feel like we've seen copied a lot since then. And I guess maybe if we did like a season on the 80s, I'd see more of like the influences that this one took from. But it felt a little bit fresh for the time. Just kind of thinking through like the way that they portrayed like this secret society of werewolves in a cultured European setting, and the way that the werewolves, like if you bite somebody, sometimes they'll become another werewolf, but sometimes they'll become a zombie instead. Yeah. You know, like unless they're a main character, it was weird.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like I just ran into that with a movie I was just watching, not for the podcast. Like I had the thought, I was like, what turns some of them into and some of them not? Like I need to get answers to this, you know, mythical thing that could happen. That will never actually happen. I need to answer.
But that goes back to, I feel like a lot of vampire stories evolve that way too, where sometimes they would like turn the person, but sometimes they would turn them into more of just like a mindless kind of zombie. Yeah. And then also the idea of well, if you kill the one that turned you into it, then you can be freed. Like I feel like those are very Hollywood influences on the tropes of these like kind of more legendary horror creatures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just because you need like that resolution, you need to have like that hope that the character can somehow get back to normal and have that happy ending. And so, you know, not to tip the hand too much, but this one definitely had more of a Hollywood ending than a horror ending, in my opinion.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I think that for the time, it makes sense as well. I mean, you think of like, I mean, I don't know if you necessarily consider it. It's always weird for me to consider a happy ending when only two of the people survive. Not saying that's the case for this one, but like the only two people survive. Is that the case for this one? That's the case for this.
Sure wasn't happy for all of them. That's true.
Yeah, but you know, it's like if you have like a group, like for The Descent, like when they consider that a happy ending when the lone survivor kind of comes out for the American version, and it's like, is that a happy ending though? Because like, what about the trauma? That's going to be worse than those, you know, freaks that were down in the caves. Because she literally lost every one of her friends, or you know, whatever the case. So, anyways, neither here nor there, I guess. But
well, and that's kind of a slasher thing too, where it's like, yeah, one person survives, but it's almost like creepier that now they have to live with it than it would be if everybody had just died.
And it's like, oh, it's, you know, such a, you know, thank goodness the most likable character survived here, but
right.
You know, they mess with your feelings that way. But yeah, but I feel like that was like, especially for this period, that was common. What I was getting at before my little rant was like, I Know What You Did Last Summer technically was similar. Scream was technically similar. Those came out around the same time, so it kind of checks out. So another thing that I thought was a little strange was just that it referenced that it was like a follow-up to American Werewolf in London, which was kind of confusing for me since I've watched it, because I mean, other than the name, like, I don't know if it was like tied to like a secret. I don't know if it was what the tie is, other than just it being American Werewolf in Paris. Like, are they going to do American Werewolf in, Hong Kong? I don't know, but it was just kind of confusing.
I have to say, I'm a big fan of sequels that are just like the same story but in a different location. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you like Brave Little Toaster? How about Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars? You like the Ninja Turtles? Well, how about we put the Ninja Turtles in ancient Japan? You like the characters from Back to the Future? What if we go all Old West on you? And I'm just like, give me all of that. I'm here for it.
I can get down with that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw that this list was listed as a sequel, and I was like, oh, do we need to go back and watch the first one? But I also couldn't find anything that said there was any real overlap between them at all. And so I don't know even like what the continuity was, like if there were similar people involved or something. But this one I saw on the Wikipedia page said, based on characters by John Landis, who I think was the writer of the other one. So I don't know, maybe they just got like rights to the name because they thought that would help it or something. But yeah, I don't know anything about the first one. This one almost felt more in the vein of like Euro Trip or something to me in the premise of it. And from there, you've got these friends who are traveling overseas and they're all like competing to see who's the most extreme, and they're like bungee jumping off tall things and stuff. And it was really trying to go for like, I thought kind of that like college guy sense of adventure, traveling in some exotic place type intrigue, almost like something you would see with the B horror movies that we watched.
Yeah.
Where it's, just get them into something like exciting and dangerous from the beginning. But then, you can't really take Tom Everett Scott serious at that role. He's America's sweetheart.
Yeah. It definitely was like unbelievable. But for all of them, I feel like.
Yeah. It would have fit better for like Tom Green or something.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, so I guess the premise of the movie is that he ends up, or this group of friends ends up in Paris, and then he ends up clicking with this girl named Seraphine, and then they find out that she's a werewolf, and then Tom ends up getting turned, and then there's this whole thing where they're trying to find like the werewolf who turned him, because if they kill him, then he can turn back, and then Seraphine can turn back, and then they can live happily ever after and being extreme together. And yeah, that was just kind of, the whole movie was just kind of punctuated with like back and forth between like super scary evil vampires and then like Tom Everett Scott doing like gag humor. Like it was just the pacing of this, it was really hard for me to figure out like what I was supposed to be feeling in any scene, because it was just kind of all over the place on that front. Yeah, it was like all of a sudden you almost had a little bit of slapstick kind of thrown into. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can see that. But it was funny to me that becoming a werewolf made him crave raw steak and loose women. Like that wasn't really a trope of werewolves that I was familiar with, but I guess it's more just like being primal or not being able to control your urges or something. So that was kind of a weird portrayal, I thought, because it was like this, like on the one hand, the werewolves were like very like cold and calculating and like creating these environments where they could attack people and kind of luring people to them and stuff. And then on the other hand, it was just like, oh, I can't control how much I want to hook up with this floozy. Which historically, that would be vampires, wouldn't it? I mean, it kind of seemed pretty vampire-y to me through a lot of this movie. Not werewolves. Yeah. But I've only got one more comment before I have some questions for you. Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to cover? Okay. Nothing. Well, my comment was CG in this one was coarse, heavy, rough. But it was also great preparation for the next time you come to visit and we watch The Phantom Menace.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because just you wait, buddy.
Yeah, it was definitely rough, but when you're watching it, you're tired, like for forever. You're just like, oh yeah, there they are. There's the bad werewolves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure in 97 it didn't look that like convincingly bad either. I feel like a lot of that stuff, a lot of that like late 90s CG looks way worse in like HD TVs in 2024 than they did on like the little standard definition ones back then. So,
yeah, I can see that.
But you ready to get into some questions?
Yeah, let's do it. Pull up my questions.
Okay. I'm going to start off with a real hard one for you.
Okay.
Who do you think came up with that condom as bubblegum gag? Because they really dragged that one out, didn't they?
Oh, I got the answer to this one. Easy peasy. The Coneheads.
The Coneheads?
Yeah, that was... He straight up stole that for the Coneheads.
Oh my gosh, you're totally right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, wait, when did Coneheads come out? I was like, it had to be before.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. But somebody involved with writing this movie must have really, really thought that was funny because they wanted to bring it back in a big and featured way. And it was just like quite cringy watching it in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, like out of all of the, I don't know, like out of all the damn things that could have happened, like what excuses you could have used for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my friends just put them in. I obviously don't carry this many. Mm-hmm. Instead of acting like it's gum, it just seems kind of creepy. But
yeah, it's very, very over the top.
Yeah. So, what is the right setting to watch this movie? If you had to, like, would it be a setting where you're with a bro? Because it's kind of with bros. Like, is it a Halloween setting? Like, what would you?
That's a good question. This isn't one that I would like put on Halloween, but it's a totally fine one to have on in the background while just like doing stuff around the house.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a movie that requires a lot of like super intense attention, but I do think there were some decent scenes in it. I mean, the graveyard scene, especially where he like transformed and started chasing that girl. And, honestly, I felt like that was one of the only real like sold out horror scenes in the movie, but I thought it did it well.
Yeah, that was kind of, so my thoughts with it was extremely similar. We set up my workshop in my dining room, which people who haven't seen my house, everyone except for you, Daniel, is, so it's further away from the TV. So I like to have noise going. I can't have music because I get too distracted. But I like to have noise going, and it's like this would be a perfect movie for that during October because I can't pay attention 100% of the time. I'm looking down doing work and stuff, but then obviously be able to kind of watch it as it goes. Like a background horror for Halloween was my answer.
Yeah, so yeah. I mean, I think just background horror in general is doing other stuff around the house. It's not an offensive movie to have on.
Nah. I don't know. At least it's on, Yeah. Next question, and I kind of played my hand on this a little bit earlier, but do you think Blade was influenced by this movie? Because, man, there were a lot of similarities. Yeah, I didn't really think about that until I saw that question. And I was like, literally contemplating, like, well, how... And I was like, underground parties happening. I mean, but like I was kind of saying earlier too, though, like the vibe, like this is the late 90s vibe. I feel like, although I know what you did last summer was, during the day, it still had like overcast on certain days. Now there was a couple of days where they're like tanning and stuff, but like just during that period, like the whole movie felt overcast or it was filmed at night. So it just kind of puts out the same vibe. But I like to think that they had no idea about this movie when making Blade, because I really like the movie Blade. I really like this one too. But
yeah, I feel like Blade kind of took a lot of ideas from this and then got rid of the comedy part and then doubled down a little bit more so on being kind of like action horror. And I think you and I both are kind of more receptive to that approach.
Yeah.
So it just kind of made it fit better. But yeah, it just really felt like there was a ton of overlap between the two.
Okay. So did that answer your question, Mr. Ham? Or wait, did that answer your question, Mr. Shit Britches? Sorry, I can't even say it.
It did, yeah. I think that, yeah, definitely I felt like there were lots of similarities, but I also was curious if someone who had watched the movie longer was like, no, you're dumb. Here's all the reasons it's different. But,
oh, no, definitely not. In fact, I was like, oh, wait, you're onto something here.
Nice.
Yeah. But I mean, so I'm going to ask this question because I think that there's a couple scenes that had blatant music or music playing kind of loud, obnoxiously. So how did you feel about the soundtrack and music choices with the film? Did it add to the mood or fell out of place? And I want to add to this real quick because did it add to the mood or did it fell out of place for the 90s? It's obviously some of the stuff is out of place for now, but for when this came out.
So to me, the music is often a dead giveaway for what the movie makers are trying to achieve, whether they actually do it or not. And I feel like this one kind of leaned into that horror comedy, little bit cheesy sometimes, trying to be kind of lighthearted other times, trying to be a little dramatic sometimes, and then trying to be scary other times. And because the movie was trying to do a bunch of different things, the soundtrack did not feel super cohesive to me. And so, as far as it being appropriate for the scene that it was in, I didn't really notice a lot where I was just like, oh, that's the absolute wrong choice for this scene in the 90s. But there were some parts where it was just like, wait, am I supposed to be like laughing now, or am I supposed to be feeling sorry for something? Like, what? Yeah. Who are the good guys? Like what even is the mood that is trying to be created by all the elements that are happening? And I think that it's hard to get sound right, and especially if the movie itself is kind of jumping back and forth between what it's trying to make you feel. What did you think?
Yeah, and the thing that was kind of strange with that was because I had to look up the soundtrack because there were like obviously I recognized like Bush, singing. I recognized a couple of the bands, but I wanted to look up the soundtrack, and considering the times, I mean, they had Bush, The Refreshments, Better Than Ezra, Cake, Reed Cross, The Suicide Machines, Fastball, Funk Junks. Junkies. I just want to add that, even though I don't know who they are, but it like popular singers for the time, in the soundtrack as well. I thought that it did. I think for the time it was all right, but I think that whoever like decided the volume on this sound was wrong, and the decision for some of those, it was almost like they reached out to Bush or whichever band. It was like, hey, we want to put one of your songs in our movie. And they're like, all right, it can only be this one though. And they're like, all right, we'll add it. It almost seemed like that, but it definitely made me feel like I was in the 90s. I didn't hate that.
Yeah, this was the soundtrack for this movie is definitely a CD that I would have bought used for like $2.99 at Hastings or something, like it definitely just like as a standalone collection of songs, I think is a pretty good just like time capsule for the time and place.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. I feel like this question is less interesting, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about other movies that this was similar to that aren't Blade. So what other movie have we watched that you think fans of would also like this movie that would be like the best example of that?
I think that stick to the 90s or early 2000s, but I'm going to throw one out from early 90s. I think it was early 90s. So write down when. Yep, 92. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That came out in 92.
Perfect
the movie,
choice.
Yeah, the movie specifically. The Frighteners, I thought, would be one as well. Both. Well, Buffy definitely has comedy. I don't remember the Frighteners a ton enough to remember that, but I would say those two for sure. I mean, obviously, I can't say it, but Blade, in any late night 90s Fox movies that you would have watched in the late 90s, early 2000s, if you watched any movies from on Saturdays or late night Fox movies, you'll like this movie.
The only other one I had on my list was Flatliners, just because I feel like it kind of had that same like dark 90s look to it, and it was kind of like the ensemble cast about the group of friends and stuff. So
The Faculty. The Faculty has the dark atmosphere too.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, The Faculty. Yep.
Yeah,
that whole thing, like it's I don't know what you would call it, but that's a thing,
Yeah, and I think most of those movies were also a lot more like horror and less horror comedy, and so I think I prefer most of them. But this one feels very much like From the Time.
Yeah. Oh, it's my question.
Yep. Finish her off.
My bad. Okay. Gnarly rating. What is your gnarly rating for this film? I want to ask this from the Blood and Guts gnarly rating. What would you rate the Blood and Guts? And remember, listeners, the scale is a scale that we create. So it could be, what was it? 1 out of 5 boobs.
Or 6 out of 9. Well, I can't even remember what the scale was. I stopped listening because I was laughing. Yeah. So I'm glad you asked that, because you turned me on to the IMDb Parents Guide a while back.
Yeah.
And on this one, the violence and gore is severe based on 20 user votes.
Okay.
But I just saw Terrifier 3 in a theater a couple weeks ago.
No.
So by comparison, I would call this one mild, not spicy. But I mean, like, reading out all the things people listed, like, yeah, that does sound pretty gory. But I don't know. I think I've just been desensitized at this point.
Yeah, I think we both have, because I thought some of them were pretty crazy, but yeah, and so I went back and watched Terrifier as well like within the past week, and so, or 2 weeks, and so desensitized too, but I was kind of curious on the thoughts there. So, but that's all I had for this movie. This season is a fun season, not having to become philosophers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is America. We don't like thinking. We don't like reading. We just like watching scary movies and talking about it with our bros.
Kind of. You're a good thinker, and my wife's a good reader. So I think you're just signaling. Oh, are you saying I'm the most American? Okay, I'm cool with that.
If you were to become a werewolf, you would be the most American werewolf.
Are you saying wolf or woof? I've been saying wolf this whole time.
Woof. I wasn't going to let you do that alone.
I was surprised Herschel didn't get in on that.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or hit us up on the IG. That's what the kids call Instagram. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening. the kind of the hidden club that's exclusively for the people that are.
I like to pretend that you just passed gas. Was that you? What'd that asshole say?
Who said my name?
I'm not gonna let you fart alone.
See, this is what real friendship is.
I got a goddamn rebuttal every time, man. You're not gonna be embarrassed by yourself.